and it really made me laugh. Here is one video where Blake Lively is posing next to this woman or talking to this woman who seemed like she's some tourist from somewhere, and you could hear her in the background. This is what made me laugh. Tell me your name one more time. And Blake says, Blake Lively. And in the same clip, you can hear someone else in the background saying, is she an actress?
Is she an actress?
Yes, so Blake Lively is not an A-list star. And
they said she settled. They said she moved on. But while Blake Lively was posing outside a Fendi store in New York, smiling for strangers who didn't even know her name, her unpaid contractors were filing over $2 million in legal claims against her compound upstate. And that's just what made it to the public record. Blake Lively, Gossip Girl, Hollywood power wife, America's girl next door. At least that's the brand. The reality behind the gates of that 110-acre dream estate in South Salem, New York, tells a very different story. Back in 2018, Blake and Ryan Reynolds quietly purchased the property through an LLC. Smart, clean, no personal liability. They snapped up. Surrounding parcels called it heaven, described it as the most beautiful place in the world. Blake stood before the town planning board on Zoom in 2022, gushing about privacy, family, and how deeply she loved this land. She wanted shovels in the ground. She wanted to raise her 4 children there. She said she was a huge fan of history. Sweet. What she apparently wasn't a fan of, paying the people who built it. By April 2026, public records showed more than $2.1 million in unpaid contractor debt sitting against that property.
Into this mess, this financial mess that Blake and Ryan is in right now. It says here that Blake and Ryan's sprawling upstate New York dream compound has been hit with more than $2.1 million in unpaid contractor debt, raising fresh questions about what has been going on behind the scenes at the couple's long-delayed mega project. The Hollywood power couple, I wouldn't call them a power couple anymore, but anyways, quietly purchased the South Salem property, a ritzy hamlet in the town of Lewisboro, 60 miles north of Manhattan, through an LLC back in 2018. They do all these shady little things through their LLCs always, so that they won't have any personal liability in anything that they do. Anyways, they snapped up some surrounding parcels to create what Lively once described during a planning board hearing as a beautiful buffer for their growing family, despite already owning a $5.7 million home 8 miles away in Pound Ridge. Yeah, I guess they never get enough. So they say here, the Gossip Girl gushed over the secluded 110-acre estate, calling it heaven and the most beautiful place in the world, claiming she and Reynolds plan to build an environmentally conscious luxury retreat where our neighbors will never see us. I hope for the neighbors' sake that they will never see them. But their ultra-private dream compound has instead turned into an 8-year luxury construction saga, now plagued by more than $2.1 million in contractor liens and allegations of unpaid work. And here they're saying that by April 2026, they owed a staggering $2,108,856.63.
The biggest claim, over $1.3 million, filed by Floken Inc., a construction company that allegedly worked on the estate until late 2025 before everything ground to a halt. But here's where it gets deeper, because this isn't new behavior. A source quietly shared that Blake once stayed at a private farm, took writing lessons there with her children, and never paid the bill. The owner stayed silent, afraid of what going after a celebrity might cost their business. And just 1 year ago today, Page 6 published a story about Blake's now-defunct lifestyle brand, Preserve, where 6 former staffers described one of the most toxic, chaotic, and disorganized workplaces they had ever experienced. Unprofessional, unqualified leadership, settlements, of up to $300,000 paid out to keep people quiet. All of it buried by Blake's longtime publicist, Leslie Sloan, who reportedly shut down every story that tried to surface. And Ryan Reynolds wasn't just a bystander. Former staffers claimed he would stop by the office and yell at employees.
Up to $300,000 after threatening legal actions over their mistreatments. However, all of the company's inner turmoil stayed under wraps due to Blake's longtime publicist, Leslie Sloan, per their former staffers. Leslie Sloan shut it down. One worker claimed they buried every single thing from that company. I also remember reading that Ryan Reynolds stopped by from time to time yelling at people, which we've now learned is as part of his job description as a husband, to yell at people that his wife works with. Anyways, there's another story today in International Business Times saying that why Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds may still be dragged into court over.
That's apparently part of the job description. So while Blake is standing outside Fendi with a baguette bag under her arm and a road worker asking to take her photo, the man behind the camera whispering, "What a sweetheart." The comment sections on every single one of those posts told a completely different story. Over 900 likes on a comment that just said nobody wants this. Hundreds more demanding justice for Justin Baldoni. The internet has not forgotten, and neither have the courts, because there's another lawsuit quietly moving forward that most media won't touch. Justin Baldoni's former publicist, Jennifer Abel, is suing Stephanie Jones, the woman who allegedly took Abel's phone.
And they're mentioning here the lawsuit between the publicists, Stephanie Jones and Jennifer Abel, who are suing each other here, which of course involves how Blake Lively got hold of Jennifer Abel's phone. Jennifer Abel, as you know, was Justin Baldoni's publicist at the time, and Stephanie Jones owned the company where Jennifer Abel worked. And when Jennifer Abel left the company, Stephanie Jones kept her phone, or basically actually took her phone away from her, promising her that she would get it back, which never happened, by the way. And according to Jennifer Abel, they had access to her phone over a year later, where they can go in and read all her medical records. They could have access to her bank. They basically stole all her personal information from her and her access to her phone, and she never received it back. This is a really, really interesting lawsuit. And as they're saying here in International Business Times, that Blake and Ryan might have to testify. They might be subpoenaed again in this case. I'm sure they will. We haven't started discovery yet, as far as I know. There hasn't been any new filings for this case, but it is an ongoing case, and the judge has allowed most of Jennifer Abel's claims against Stephanie Jones to move forward.
Held on to it for over a year and gave Blake Lively's team access to her personal data. Her medical records, her bank accounts, everything. Blake and Ryan may be subpoenaed to testify. A source says the last thing they want is to sit in that deposition chair, and yet, the judge has allowed most of Abel's claims to move forward. The story isn't over. It never was. Blake dropped her lawsuit against Justin Baldoni. She lost 10 out of 13 claims. She walked away with $0, and yet the PR machine kept running. News published a glowing fashion recap of her Fendi appearance. Not a single critical word.
Blake Lively basically says that she was on this event, and then they go through everything in this lawsuit, again reminding everyone that she got $0 from Justin Baldoni, and she dropped her lawsuit, and she lost 10 out of her 13 claims, just reminding everyone what really happened here. So yes, another tone-deaf stunt from Blake Lively. According to her lawyers, as you know, when she's not showing up at Fendi stores with a baguette bag, she is working really hard to change the laws all over America so other people can also abuse the legal system and blame it on other people when they are unpopular on the internet and sue them for millions and millions of dollars. And then she's pushing this law, as you know, to make sure that they can't be sued back. And if that happens, they
called her the gossip girl Alum. They talked about her trench coat. They called it a refined sense of fashion.
All right, before I go here, I wanted to mention this ridiculous article in E Online or on E News. I would be so embarrassed if I worked for E News and I had to write these kind of articles. I mean, seriously. Look at this headline. You will XOXO Blake Lively sleek look at Fendi event. Blake Lively stepped out in style at Fendi event May 19, wearing a classic beige trench coat over a black tank top, matching jeans, and pointed toe heels. You know you love Blake Lively's style. We don't. Yeah, we don't like Blake Lively's style. The internet don't like Blake Lively's style. I thought at least that was one thing that everyone agreed on after watching her horrific wardrobe choices for It Ends With Us. We don't like her style, E! News. And again, they're calling her the Gossip Girl alum. It's been 20 years since Gossip Girl, I think, but that's still her claim to fame. Anyways, once again, showed off her refined sense of fashion at a Fendi event in New York City, stepping out in a classic beige trench coat, blah, blah, blah. Now they've said that twice already. Okay. She completed her look with a Marquise diamond necklace and, of course, a Fendi baguette bag. But the outfit was much more subtle than what she wore at the 2026 Met Gala earlier this month when she ascended up the iconic staircases in front of
$2 million in unpaid labor, workers who can't collect, a phone that was stolen, a lawsuit still unfolding, a brand that collapsed under allegations of toxic abuse.
Today that this story was published on page 6. Blake Lively accused of creating insane, toxic, emotionally draining workplace at now defunct lifestyle brand. Remember, it all came out how Ryan Reynolds was a tyrant and how people there didn't get paid as well, people working for Blake Lively. It says here that 6 former staffers at Blake Lively's defunct lifestyle company, Preserve, are breaking their silence on the alleged toxic, unprofessional, and chaotic workplace they experienced. The entire company was an absolute disaster, a staffer said. The workplace allegations that Blake is making now against Justin are deeply ironic, given that it was one of the most insane, toxic, emotionally draining, and disorganized environments you could imagine. Someone who worked for her said then. And it said here that Lively's brother, Eric Lively, who was reportedly hired to be the creative director of the company, was allegedly also careless with his role and often overslept, leaving many staffers to wait outside in the cold before they were let into the Manhattan studio apartment where the
all of it quietly buried under a beige trench coat and a designer bag. The question isn't whether Blake Lively is a sweetheart or a villain.
I feel like that is the last word in anyone's vocabulary who knows this case by now, is the last word that they would use to describe Blake Lively. She is not a sweetheart, but in this moment, she acted like one. Obviously, she's so nice to everyone now. She takes the time, she goes out of her way to take a photo of this other woman, and then Oscar's leaving. Yeah, he had enough. Yeah, he gave up early. But anyways, all the comments, of course, online are not disappointing either. Comments like these on the E! News stories. As you know, E! News is the #1 outlet that Blake and her reps call when they want a nicey story about Blake Lively. They haven't written any critical pieces on her throughout this entire drama.
The real question is, how many more people had to stay silent to protect that image? Subscribe to Celebzeno right now, because the stories the media won't tell, we will.